and then just agriculture. And effects. I put this up here, but I don't want to be all doom and gloom, because with the education, people have really, grassroots foundations have really come together and worked to improve these conditions through education, through the watershed councils, trying to get some of these dams put down, doing huge water cleanups and stuff. So it's not all doom and gloom, but we have to face the reality that we very much negatively affect the environment of which we live, and especially so for the cities. And one of the things that people don't realize is that there's a whole nother attitude towards water. I look at water as, oh, I love to go hiking around it. Oh, I want to be very responsible about it. But there's a whole nother way of thinking, and it is really highlighted within the economic, political, and even socioeconomic status of cities. I want to throw it out there. So you're a councilman in Providence. This did come up this year. We have a lot of snow. There's nowhere to put the snow. Do we dump it in the river? I want somebody to argue a point to me. Do we dump it in the river? It's water. Why? Yeah, but you know what? I'm a politician, and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to say, you know, that little 6-year-old is on the isn't on the sidewalk. There's nowhere to put the snow on the sidewalk, but he's got to walk a mile to school with his mommy. But there's no other spot to put the snow. Now what? However, you know, water, snow going into the system is pretty much, once it gets into the rivers and stuff, if it's a big enough water, you know, by the time it gets to the ocean, because it's so much closer, those chemicals and stuff should really come out of that water, and it does go into Narragansett Bay. And really, our water comes from Situate Reservoir, which is way over here. Will it affect the city? Will it affect the water quality? So do you do it or don't do it? Right, but you know, we don't get our fish from because fish don't live there anyway, because it's been so polluted in the past. So, I mean, really, does it matter whether or not we kill a bug because the infiltration? Or now, if you're in the city, what do you do? My dog, yeah, dump that stuff in the water. Yep. Instead of waiting for it to dump. Yep. Right. So basically, I know I have to wrap it up. So you can see how there's so many different really quick, because I don't have much time here. All right, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, there's no right answer. Quite frankly, my answer is don't put it there. You're going to hurt the environment. But you have people in the city who are here like, I need to walk my kid to school. I need to do this. They're looking for an easy alternative, so on and so forth. Their thought process isn't going to be the same as an environmentalist. It'd be like, absolutely not. There's no way to do it. So I did want to do that. How much time do I have? All right, so I have 1 minute to talk about urban thinking. Basically, to sum it up, research has shown that when you're talking to residents of an urban environment, they actually turn around and they don't care about the world at large. Really, when it comes down to it, it's not that they don't care, it's that they don't consider it in their average daily life. It does not lead them knowing that the ice caps are melting. It's not going to lead them to conserve water at home. However, they did find that if they knew about their water resources at home, and know about their local, where the water's coming from, what's going on, that they're more likely to start conserving water, which is a huge thing. Also, if it's going to help their pocket, then that's going to be what they're worried about as well. They're not going to conserve water just because it's the good thing to do for the world at large. They want, stuff that's going to hit them right there in that spot. So you can read through the slides. Lower priority to conserve resources. And then best management practices right here. Some of the things that you can do in the city to increase the, pretty much increase water conservation techniques, best management practice, and do stormwater. So read through that. Awesome. And we're all set.
Together and do a cleanup for us, that would be great. I'm going to touch on 2 more topics, so I'm going to kind of run through them because you're going to have, I don't want to interfere with the falconry that's coming later, and I'm really glad we're on before that. We're going to talk about wetlands and wetland ecology. This is a slideshow presentation that my coworker developed for last year. It's already on the website. So I'm going to touch on what I think is the most important things I want to take away from this presentation. So basically, it's what is a wetland? Could people tell me what a wetland is? It's kind of on the slide. Yeah? So it's an area that has water on it at least part of the year. And the most important thing to realize is that while a lot of areas will have water on it at least part of the year, like, oh yeah, everything we're looking at right now outside, this has water on it that will last through part of the growing season. Okay? So we're talking about wetlands that we're talking about enough water that it's going to change the soil composition and it's going to change what type of plants can grow on there. The limiting factor with water is it doesn't allow oxygen. It doesn't allow oxygen into the soil, or it doesn't allow oxygen into the plant roots. So it will change what kind of soils you're going to find. I think you'll go over hydric soils with your soils classes or your soils workshop. Wetland soils do a lot of different functions, but they can only support certain types of plants. And only certain types of plants can live where there's not a lot of oxygen for their roots. So in order to identify a wetland, because sometimes we'll go to a wetland and it is, let me see if it shows it here. It'll have water on it, and sometimes we'll go and it's completely dry. So how can we tell if that's a wetland or not? A lot of people who are developing will say, it's not a wetland, it's completely dry right now, and we're talking August. But if you look at the soils, you're going to see that glaciation. You're going to see where the water table rose up enough and then rose down, and that's why you get those streaks. Does anybody know what those streaks are? The red streaks, yeah? Yeah, oxidization of iron. That means that there was some, an upland soil has a lot of iron oxidation in it. A wetland soil only has a little bit because it prevents oxygen from getting to the soil most of the year. So we can tell by looking at the soil, and we can tell by what plants are growing there. There's several different types. In inland wetlands, we're looking at swamps, marshes, bogs, and fens. Also wet meadows that a lot of you probably don't see. Wet meadows are where you're going to have water regime in there, at least in the springtime. You'll have some water covering parts of that meadow, and only certain plants can grow in there. What do you think? There used to be a lot more wet meadows around Rhode Island especially, but around New England. What do you think happened to those wet meadows? What do you think they're being used for right now? Yeah. Farmland, yeah. A lot of farmers plowed them and turned them into farmland, so you don't notice them anymore. But if anybody drives by 138 going to URI, and there's an open field with a dairy farm in the back there, and you notice in the springtime there's water there, and sometimes there's ducks hanging out in the wet meadow. That is definitely a wet meadow that was turned into an agricultural field. Ponds, rivers, and streams are another type of wetland. We don't think of them as a wetland, but obviously they're wet. How often? All the time. So it's very limiting as to what can grow in there. And then there's vernal pools, which are my favorite, and coastal marshes. So swamps. So we distinguish what a wetland type is by what can grow in there. In a swamp, you would have trees and bushes or woody plants. So what would you think this tells us about the water regime? Is there water in there most of the year, half of the year, only a little part of the year? Pardon me? A little of the year. And why would you say that? Even though it's the right answer. Exactly, absolutely. Trees need to have a lot of oxygen getting into their roots. So if the water was there most of the year, they would not be able to grow. That's why when you have water in there for more than half the year, you usually have marshes and wet meadows. Marshes will allow some plants to grow. They're usually pretty shallow, and you'd have things like reeds and and escaping me, marsh plants. Water lilies, thank you. I'm looking right at them. I can't think of them. So you'd have certain types of plants that can grow even when there's water in there, in the marshes and wet meadows. Bogs and fens are specialized areas. We only have a few of them. Basically, they're depressions in the ground where you get some groundwater, but you don't have any inlet or outlet to them. And they're very acidic, and only very few plants can actually grow in here. And these are the places where you have the infamous carnivorous plants growing. Do we have any carnivorous plants growing in Rhode Island? We do. We have two types, the pitcher plant and the sundew, okay? So, and they would only be found in bogs or fens. And you'd have a lot of moss in there also. Ponds and rivers, I think it's pretty explanatory. They have water in them all of the year, and they're so deep, they're more than 6 feet deep, that plants cannot be rooted. And that's why you have that open waterway. And vernal pools, which are really, really special places, you would find them in a depression that has groundwater part of the year. So they may or may not have an inlet or an outlet to them, but they have groundwater influence, and the groundwater is high. What time of the year? Spring, okay. And then groundwater drops during the summer, and so it will drop low enough so that there could be no water in them at all. And there are animals that can only live and breed in these particular places, in these vernal pools. One of them, a wood frog, spotted salamander, marble salamander, and fairy shrimp are the ones that are obligated to vernal pools. Can anybody think of why that would be the best place for them to breed? Yes? There's no fish. Yeah, the fish can't live there because there's not enough water during the year. So because there's no fish, there's fewer predators for them. Not that there's no predators, because they eat each other, and giant water bugs will eat them, but there's very few predators. The fish would just gobble up the eggs or the tadpoles very quickly.